I continue dealing with the qualifications of the bishop. The bishop is, of course, the pastor, a pastor of a church. Not every man called of God to preach, or let me say not every man qualified to preach, is qualified to be a bishop. And I think there is an unusual ability and unusual demeanor that God gives to a man to pastor a local church. There have been some tremendous pulpiteers that made very poor pastors. And there have been some tremendous pastors that lacked some eloquence and gravitas in the pulpit, and yet they pastored their congregations wonderfully. I think the matter of being apt to teach probably disqualifies as many preachers from being pastors as any of the other qualifications. Of course, in the day we live in, if a preacher has been married one time, his marriage is quote unquote right, well, that's the only qualification he needs. We need none other, and we'll call him to pastor our churches. The last several days, in fact, I began last week in the 14th and the 15th area of qualification. That would be in verse number 4. One that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. A bishop then must be, and the qualifications begin. And when we arrive at number 14 is not a lesser qualification. It's certainly not a greater qualification, but it's not a lesser qualification of any of the ones we read previously. A bishop then must rule well his own house. And a bishop then must have his children in subjection with all gravity. Now, Paul explains under inspiration why this particular qualification would be there. The matter of a man ruling his own house, in my understanding of the context, would not necessarily be restricted only to young children and child rearing. Now, that cannot be separated because of what we read in the last clause of verse number 4, having his children in subjection with all gravity. I don't think that is a reference to adult children. When a young man grows up, the book of Genesis says, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, he will cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. There comes a point in time, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, there comes a point in time when a young man needs to leave father and mother and establish his own home. And there comes a point in time when daughter needs to cut the apron strings, and she needs to marry and be a man's wife and bear children and guide the home, as Paul has established. While young children are in the home, they are to be in subjection with all gravity. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. And fathers are warned not to provoke their children to wrath. You can tell very much about a man by observing his children in the home, by seeing the small children, adolescent children, primary children, the young people in the home. You can observe very much. And if a pastoral candidate came to candidate at my church, and he's, has a 30-year-old wife, and they have 3 or 4 little children, and those little children are two-legged terrors running all over the church auditorium and causing all kind of confusion and mayhem, I would not vote for that man as a pastoral candidate. And the reason I would not is his children are not in subjection with all gravity. There should be a soberness, a seriousness, a correct deportment of children. And there's nothing better than a good sense of humor. And my grandfather was a man of grave deportment, and yet he had one of the best sense of humors of any man I have ever met. He loved to laugh, and he loved to hear a good joke. and he loved to fellowship with people. And yet, my grandfather could walk in the room and the conversation would stop. He had that type of a demeanor, that type of carriage he possessed. The matter of gravity here does not exclude having a sense of humor, not at all. In fact, all of the Antifa and the anarchists and all of the, everybody's aggrieved, everybody's been cheated, and this whole movement that we have today, nobody has a sense of humor. No one is able to laugh. They're ready to file lawsuits, but no one is able to laugh. And sometimes I think too many of us, the vast majority of us, take ourselves entirely too seriously. I don't think you nor I are quite as important as we like to think we are. Ronald Reagan always said the best humor is when you can laugh at yourself, and that was a man of great gravitas, and yet a man that had a tremendous sense of humor and enjoyed a good laugh, and always had a good joke to tell to lighten the atmosphere and to lighten the mood. Now, there's a reason why this matter of ruling his own house, I think paying his bills, keeping the house in repair, and so on, and then having his children in subjection with all gravity. A man that doesn't have his children in subjection with all gravity is probably not going to have his household affairs in order. But there's a reason for this. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Now that is a legitimate question. My mother in her office has a sign on the wall, and that sign says this: past performance is the best indicator of future conduct. Past performance is the best indicator of future conduct. You could say it like this: what you have done is what you are going to do. What you have done is what you are going to do. Generally, men spend their whole lives being what they are. And I know that we put on airs sometimes and we put our best foot forward, and you can do that for a while. But in the final analysis, what you truly are and what I truly am is going to become evident and manifest for people to see. And whenever people make an honest, objective observation of what we are, there's no need for us to become offended or angry or upset about those things at all, because that is an honest assessment. A man that will not rule well his own house, his bills are unpaid, the plumbing leaks, the yard is a mess, the gutters are falling off the house. Solomon says in Proverbs, through slothfulness the roof droppeth through. And I'm not talking about having the Taj Mahal, but a little tar and a little elbow grease and a little paint and a little soap and water doesn't cost a whole lot of money. And you can make repairs. A man that wouldn't keep his automobile repaired with 150,000 miles on it, and I say this in passing, the car I'm driving right now in my meetings, I've been driving for 13 years, and that car has 461,000 miles on it as of the day I'm recording this broadcast. 461,000 miles. I'm on my way to 500,000 miles on this car. A man that wouldn't keep a car repaired that has 150,000 miles on it is not going to keep a new car repaired when it comes time to start making repairs on a new automobile. If he won't rule well his own house, then he's not going to rule well or take care of the church of God. Now, notice how this is worded. Now, I love the King James text and believe the King James text to be inspired and to be perfect. For if a man know not how to rule his own house. Did you hear the way that's worded? Verse before says, one that ruleth well his own house. A man that will rule well his own house obviously will know how to rule well his own house. All right, look at the wording in verse number 5. For if a man know not how to rule his own house. Now, I'm not being necessarily critical or ugly, but there are some men that simply don't know how to govern any situation or to govern any circumstance. There are some men that they just don't know how. Well, if a man doesn't know how to pay his bills on time and to keep his household affairs in order, then that man will not know how to rule or to take care of the church of God. This word, take care, this two-word phrase, is defined as to superintend or to oversee. If a man, for if a man know not how to rule his own house, he is not able to keep his household affairs in order. He is not able to govern his household affairs. His bills get behind. The grass grows up. His children are disorderly. If a man know not how to rule his own house, which would have to be in the area of managing and governing and superintending the affairs of his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? How shall he take care? How shall he superintend and oversee? It is the pastor, the bishop, who is in charge in the local assembly of keeping or securing that work. He is to take care of the church of God. Now, you can't have a full-time evangelist pastoring a church and expect him to take care of the church of God. Well, I have a pastoral staff and I turn the work over to them. But nowhere does Paul talk about having a pastoral staff and turning the work over to them. Paul says the bishop is to take care. He is to superintend in the matter of the church of God. And a man that can't superintend the affairs, the domestic affairs of his own house, is not going to be able to superintend the spiritual affairs that he finds in the church of God. My time is gone on the Bright Spot Hour today. The Lord willing, I'll be back again on tomorrow.
Bright Spot Hour at Post Office Box 4, Greenville, South Carolina 29602.